For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
I guess the question then becomes, how much do you stay in touch? How much do you bombard? Because between social media and e-newsletters, there's got to be a limit. And I know there's no magic number, but just be mindful of it as you measure the stats, I guess. And I'm talking to you, Dan. You're the maven at it, but really watch the stats, and you don't want to tick people off.
No, and on social media as well. Don't bug people too much on social media anymore. Posting more than a couple times a day is kind of unheard of at this point, especially on Facebook. So just keep it light. Keep it to the essentials. Also, my entrepreneurial dilemma is a big one. What do I put in the holiday greeting, Josh? Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, both.
Happy Kwanzaa, it's
Hanukkah's over. So
Hanukkah's over. However, I've been receiving, holiday greetings since the beginning of December when Hanukkah was there. So do you really run the gamut? No doubt. It's safest to put happy holidays. And for me, I guess, you don't always know who your clientele are. So you don't want to piss anybody off. That being said, use happy holidays, but find something else to go with it. Find something else that can trigger some attention. Don't worry so much about the two words. Worry about the message. For us, I know when we're creating our card, it's actually the longest discussion we have is what's the message that we want to send out, and then it's bang for the buck. Do you want to spend 40 hours building a message and a video and all that, or do you just want to get something succinct and out because here today, gone tomorrow? So I'm a believer more of happy holidays because it's a little safer, doesn't offend, and it really attracts all your customers. But in addition to that, find something else that can attract. Find something else that is really geared towards people and not one sect of people.
Mm-hmm. I think I said Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, but we'll have to debate that internally tomorrow. Josh, first a couple of quick notes, one of which is a follow-up from last week. We're talking about the trade dispute between Canada and China. Canada, acting on a U.S. warrant, detained a executive from the telecom company Huawei, and now 2 Canadians have been detained in China, presumably as some sort of retaliation. Let's leave the politics aside and just talk about some of the business effects. And China is a lot of Chinese people are boycotting a landmark Canadian brand, actually.
And Canada Goose has definitely been targeted by the Chinese. Canada and the Chinese, and I've been there many times, and they love imported product. They have typically loved Canadian product in the past. They continue to do so. But when you're attacking one of their own, there's definitely going to be some fallback, and there's an attack on Canada Goose. Canada Goose sales have dropped. Canada Goose share price has dropped. 2 weeks ago was hovering just below $70, and at the opening of today was probably around, I think it was around 52. So even the share price has dropped quite a bit. Even equally so, the Chinese equivalent brand has really, I won't say skyrocketed, but jumped by about 10-15%. So there's really a play on there. That being said, it's not everybody that's getting affected. Tim Hortons really hasn't changed that much. People are still using Tim Hortons there. IMAX, another Canadian brand, they haven't boycotted IMAX. So I think it's very much hit and miss. Definitely to the smaller entrepreneur, the less well-known, I don't think they're going to feel it from that aspect. But from people's personal safety, they might.
The other thing is that's worth noting is that Canada Goose is not actually a Canadian company anymore. It was bought by the American firm Bain Capital, which, if you sound familiar, was Mitt Romney who worked for Bain Capital. So Bain actually owns a majority stake in Canada Goose.
Yes, the question becomes it's North America at this point because it's Canada that detained, but it's U.S. that decreed or said please detain them on our behalf. So call it a North American hit.
RBC unveils their robo-advisor. This is getting interesting, talking to robots to buy financial products.
This is not the first one. I know a couple of years ago we spoke BMO, and Chris is shaking his head because he's in the IT world, and we'll come to him in a minute. We didn't give a microphone just yet, but this is robo-investing. This is not new on the block. It just happens to be newer for RBC that they piloted, they tested, they're coming out with it more full-blown, and it really is just a lesser expensive alternative to investing. So for the I don't want to say less sophisticated people, but people that really don't want to have that direct those discussions with an investment advisor, don't want to pay the 1+% in fees, they can cut their fees in half and they can still let the AI take over. This is about AR. This is just one other artificial intelligence software that is coming to your neighborhood and right next to you. And robo investing, because it's ETFs, they as long as you give them a guideline, give the AI the development, the parameters. Thank you. The parameters. Then it'll go and do it. And the reality is, so much information online. I don't see why they couldn't.
Finally, this is an important one to consider for your website and for your social media going into 2019. The phenomenon of Splinternet. Tell us about that.
Splinternet. Now, this is something I've really read recently, and certainly with the China versus U.S. You definitely have these competing online solutions. You have, here you have your Googles and that of the world. There you have your Taibo. You have your Weibo. You have there's the equivalent online, whether it's search engine, whether it's Youku for YouTube equivalent there, whatever it is. There's WeChat, of course. WeChat is very big in China. And it's competing with US. So the question is your brand that you have on Google, that you have on Amazon, that you have on whatever other US-based software app, that doesn't necessarily hit the entire world anymore. That hits, maybe more than half the world, so that's great, but it doesn't hit the full world. So if you're really going after a global aspect and you want to hit the Asian population, certainly China, then you have to consider other platforms.
By the way, Google Plus, you heard the news there. That's going to be shut down. That's Google's unsuccessful social network that we all have to fill out the profiles just to do it, kind of thing. But they're going to shut that down in the coming months. By the way, so that's
they're also looking to do a slightly censored version for China called Google Dragonfly, and I don't know if that's really going to fly either.
All right, coming up, we're going to talk to Chris from CDMS and talk about some IT and lots more issues. Plus, we'll talk about family businesses and transitioning your family business with FL's Michael Newton later in the program.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL Montreal's Josh Miller. And let's introduce our guest for this evening, our last entrepreneur profile of 2018, Chris Symeon of IT solutions firm CDMS. Welcome, Chris.
How are you doing, guys?
Good. How are you?
Dan? Very well, thank you.
Excellent, and it's CDMS. It doesn't exactly tell the whole story. So, Chris, what is CDMS?
So we're like you just said, an IT support company. We work with companies that have IT departments already, and we complement those companies. So we add support to what they have already. And for companies that don't have any IT support, then we become their IT support company. So they come to us for everything.
Now, when did you start this?
22 years ago now, 1997. So when I first started, it was actually not what I have today. It was not intentional to be a company. I actually started this as a consultant. I saw a need in the market where there was very, very little support, or companies were not doing the proper support as far as I was concerned. And I said, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in the race and see what I can do. But honestly, it was just one man show, going out there and supporting companies.
So you were working elsewhere before.
I was working elsewhere.
And not satisfied, so you said, you know what, if I don't believe in the company I'm working for, it doesn't matter who it was back then I want to create a service that I can be proud of.
And the funny thing is, I did believe in the company I was working for. It was actually a software manufacturer. And the problem that I had is we were selling software to companies worth millions of dollars, but there really was no real support for this product. And so we had resellers, we had people that trained, but nobody knew it like we knew it. And funny enough, I went to my boss at the time and I said, I think we should do this. I think we should support customers that we're selling them these products, and nobody's really supporting them. And I'm talking huge companies here. And he said, no. He said, you know what? Just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. And thank you. And so I made a decision to go out there and help these people. I mean,
so
it was
a void in the market, and said, you know what? Let me just go.
Yeah.
Now, were you concerned, like a family side? This is definitely a kind of a jump into the pond, a jump into the lake, leap of faith, if you will.
Absolutely. So when you said family side, that's funny because at the time I had two very young kids. We had made the decision for my wife to stay home at the time. So here I am. I'm kind of leaping into the void. I don't know what to expect. Although I did know a lot of people in the industry, if I failed, I mean, failure was not an option. But honestly, I never expected a business to start from that. I thought I was going to be doing consulting work forever, right?
Were you busy from day one?
From day one. From day one, I didn't stop. It was all over North America. And people, like I said, people knew me. It was a product that was very specialized, so people knew me across North America. This is before the internet took off. This is before a lot of this stuff. And the reason I actually started a business is because of my insurance broker calls me up and says, we'd like to sell you some disability insurance. And I said, disability insurance? Why are you selling disability? Well, you're a one-man show. I mean, what happens if you get hurt? What happens if you get hurt? So I said, you know what? Something clicked in my head, and I made a decision. And the decision was not to buy more insurance, was to build a business. And so I went 100 miles an hour. I was working God knows how many hours a day. Until I was able to hire the first guy, and then the second guy, and then the third guy.
So now that your decision is validated, that you know there's a market out there,
Yep.
Was it very quick at that point to hire your first 1-2 people? Like, is this in your first few months, first year, or beyond?
Within the first year. So the way what I wanted to do, and again, my background is a technical background. It's not a business background. So I wasn't going through this with a business plan saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. The thing I wanted to do is protect the people I was hiring. So when I was hiring people, I had to make sure that I had their salaries. I had to make sure that I'm not pulling them out of a job that they're getting paid for already, and within a few months we're going under, right? So I wanted to make sure I had their salary. So it took me a little bit longer. It took me probably 7 or 8 months to hire my first guy. After the first one, within a month, I hired a second. Within 3 months, I hired the fourth, and we go from there.
When it comes to the era, going back 2 decades, how disorganized were some of the companies you were working with? I mean, you're pre a lot of any IT systems, pre-email, pre all of that.
Very, very disorganized. And it's funny, 20 years later, so we have a lot of bells and whistles today, and everything is easier supposedly, and everything's cooler. And depending on the size of the company, you still see that. You still see kind of the same stuff I was seeing 20 years ago, where they have basically the same needs.
Now, you grew fairly rapidly. How many people are you today?
So today we are 50 in the company. I went as high as 150 at one point.
No, and we're going to come to that story, because I know part of the story is you sold and then you bought it back.
Yep.
But we're not there yet.
Okay.
I have so many questions on that, but I kind of want to lead up to it. In the meantime, as you're building your business and as you're adding people, where are you finding these technical people? And they also have to be able to interact. It's not always easy to find, forgive me, but to find the IT specialists that also have some interpersonal skills.
It's not. And for me, it was, believe it or not, the interpersonal skills were almost more important than the technical skills. So I can teach somebody technical. I had a very good background technically. Finding the people that had the same, I'm going to call it the same value system as myself. So for me, the customers wanted me, and I started day one and I was running, my feet never touched the ground, is because the customer knew that I was never going to let them down. I was going to work as many hours as it took to get a problem solved. And that's actually what I did. I was a problem solver, right? And the people that I was looking for after that were all people that had the same value system. If they were working in an account, they were going to do whatever they need to do for a customer to get that done. And to this day, that's still my value system. When I hire people, that's the first thing I look for. And then second thing is technical, and then everything else after that.
You mentioned earlier the kind of the rift or the difference between being a technician versus a business person.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a technician, people rely on you.
Yep.
As a business person, you know they can't just rely on you.
Yep.
When did you kind of come to that realization and I guess empower your people to really, I don't want to say be the business owner, but take charge of those customers?
So the folks that I hired took care of the customers, but in reality, if I look at my business over the last 22 years, there's actually two versions of my business. So if I look at what I started, I had very good people, very smart people, but ultimately, I'm an entrepreneur, and so control. I mean, it was always me. I was always at the center. I needed to talk to all the customers. I needed to make all the decisions, whether it be accounting, whether it be whatever. Version one, I'm going to call it version one of my business until I sold, and you want to talk about that later. There was very little empowerment. In fact, I would be involved in everything. I mean, I would let them do their thing. I would start the process.
Short leash.
It was a short leash. I would let them do this, but I was always there, always asking, always checking, always. So,
do you find it tough to convince clients that they need a certain technical program that they may not be familiar with, especially in the security front? That I find is a tough conversation to have sometimes.
It is, and it's the training. It's the training for the customer, right? They have to. So it depends on the size of the customer. So if you're talking a very, very large customer, that's not the case. They have their staff and they do their research and they know what they're looking for. But as you start going, to smaller and smaller customers, it's harder to do that, and it's expensive. It's not just so we were talking about security before. It's not just the fact that you're trying to teach them about something or explain to them that there's a danger in the way they're doing things. It's expensive. So you can go in and a piece of software can cost $20,000. So $20,000 for a large corporation is nothing. But as you get into the smaller businesses.
Now, you were referring to version 1 before you're referring to version 2.
Yeah.
Now, now I happen to know a little bit of the story behind the scenes.
Yes.
You ended up selling your business at one point, or most of your business.
Yep.
Were you looking? Were you just quickly? Were you looking to sell? Was that an active search?
No. So when I started the business, the most of my business, I would say 95% of my business was actually out of the U.S. So we were doing like today, we're doing service desk or help desk. We're doing server support. We're doing supporting again end users, right? And we had major contracts out of the U.S. When I started, and the company was growing, and like I said a few minutes ago, the company went as high as 150 people. It was great. The U.S. dollar was where close to where it is today, and actually even higher. And so the exchange was great. We were making money. We were able to grow, support the customer, give whatever we needed to. Over a period of time, and everybody remembers the 2007, 2008 fiasco that everybody went through, the dollar had reached almost par with Canada. And I look around, and and I have very little Canadian business. I mean, I had probably 5-10% Canadian business, and the rest of it was the U.S. So I had to quickly turn the company around, knowing that the U.S. was going to go out.
We have to get more on that story. This has only happened a couple of times in the 10 years we've been profiling entrepreneurs, but why an entrepreneur sells a business and then buys it back later. So more on that with Chris Symeon of CDMS on the way.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL Montreal's Josh Miller with you. And this evening we're chatting with Chris Symeon of IT solutions firm CDMS. And coming up in a little bit, we're going to chat with FL's Michael Newton on transitioning family businesses. Pretty good time to talk about that, Josh, over the holidays, because those discussions happen. It's the end of the
family
year.
dinners. You're talking over turkey, and
we're tired, and maybe it's the time to think about the next step here. So maybe we'll just turn that theme song down a little bit and get back to Chris. So, Chris, one of the more interesting things that we talk about with, and it's happened with a couple of entrepreneurs on the show in 10 years, but very rare, someone sells their business and then later buys it back.
So we were chatting just before the news. Why sell? Let's first quickly. Why sell the business? Were you looking to do that? I know you were very much in the U.S. And I guess looking for some type of partner. Maybe you can elaborate.
So I was in the U.S., so 95% of my business was out of the U.S. The market was turning in the U.S. I saw the dollar creeping up, which made it very, very difficult for me to, less and less money was coming in. We were actually at one point even losing money because the exchange rate was so high. I needed a partner, and I needed somebody that can quickly open up the Canadian market for me. So I needed something that complemented what I did. So not in the same business as me. I wasn't looking for somebody to buy the company that was going to come in and decimate it and say, look, I'm just
tear
going
it
to
to shreds and change it all up.
Yeah. I was looking for somebody, and in fact, I found a company that what their business was, they were building PCs, they were building servers and PCs. So they were a white box company, if you want, selling mostly to government and municipalities. And they had no services. So I said, perfect. I'm going to work with these people. I'm going to add what we're doing. I actually sold 75% of the business and not 100%. So I kept 25% of that.
And you remained active.
And I remained active,
but not in control.
But not in control.
So you couldn't feed that control freak nature that you were talking about.
I could not feed the control I could not do that. Plus, he pushed me in directions that I didn't necessarily want to go. But again, this is no longer majority business of mine, so I had no choice to go down that road. Within a few months, so they worked a lot with the government, and if you guys remember 2007, 2008, even the government wasn't buying anything anymore. So they lost a ton of money. I'm talking now $40-50 million, which it spiraled at that point. Mm-hmm. The company was looking to how did they get out? They owed money to the bank and the whole bit. And just near the end, just when I saw that everything was going to just go out and they were going to take down CDMS with it, I made an offer to the guy and they accepted. And
you bought it back.
I bought it back.
So from the time that you sold to the time you bought it back, how long was that?
Less than a year.
Now, here's the bigger question. From the time you bought it back, that you had to rebuild, because you probably had to rebuild some of the name and some of that. How long did it take you to rebuild?
I would say within the first 3 years of buying it back, it was very difficult. So understand, when I lost in U.S. customer base, more than 100 people, I had to let go more than 130 people actually. So that was very difficult, and that was during the transition. So the other company had CDMS at the time. We lost the contract. We bid for it, but the price was too high for the U.S. customer, and so here we find ourselves where we're now down to a skeleton crew, right? We're down to 20 people. We sacrificed. Honestly, I have very, very good people, and some of them are still with me. They've been with me for 20 years. And we did what we needed to do. And in my case, I took a salary cut. I completely took out my salary for 3 years to allow the company to
talk about family sacrifice.
You got to do what you got to do. At the end of the day, especially the people we're talking about version 1, version 2. So version 2 of the company, the biggest difference is the first one was mine. The second one was theirs. The second time I bought back the company was not for me because I could have walked away. I had sold my business.
When you say theirs, you mean for your team, for the employees that stayed.
Employees that stayed, absolutely. So version 2 of the company is them now building the company and me basically guiding them and saying, no, we're not going to do it like this.
Take me back to the moment when you decided to buy it back. I mean, were you planning on retiring? Were you on a beach sipping a pina colada somewhere and you had to say, I have to get back to Montreal now? Or
I actually had to have a discussion with these people and say, look, if I do this, I'm doing it for you. Are we in? Are we going to do this? And I was too young to retire, to be fair. And it was my baby. I mean, I started this. I saw it grow to this beautiful thing and watch it almost go completely under. But I believed in it. I mean, we still had customers, some customers in Montreal that believed in us. These people are focused. I mean, that they bleed service. So it was actually an easy decision to make, to buy it back. But buying it back, the sacrifice was not just financial from my end. You have to put a business together that is viable. In other words, I'm a 7/24 shop. In order to do 7/24, you have to have people there 3 shifts a day and on weekends. And they have to be there. They have to be physically there. You're not just telling them it's a 7/24 and they're calling some guy on a cell phone, right? It costs money. And when I first bought the company back, the business wasn't there actually to have somebody there. But in order to create the business, in order to go out and sell the business to customers and say, look, come to us, this is what we do, I had to do it. And
so this was a kind of build it, they will come versus get the business and then kind of chase afterwards.
You had to have the structure in place. If the structure wasn't there, they were not going to come, because what differentiates you from every other company that does IT, and especially in this province, right?
Now, in this version 2, when you're including your key team members, are you really including them in these type of decisions, or are you back to, and I'm just using your words earlier, you back to the control?
So ultimately, my role today is president of the company, so I do have the final say, but it is evolved around these individuals. So they're telling me what, I mean, I have a vision, I know where we want the company to go, but ultimately, I would tell you the best example I can give you is when I first started the business in version 1, I would go on vacation for a week and it would be stressful. I mean, I was on the phone, I couldn't relax. And today I go on vacation. I actually take a 1-month vacation in the summertime, and I don't have to worry because the business runs by itself. And it runs by itself because
there's the right people there.
The right people are in place, and each one knows what they're doing, and that's it.
What percentage of the business, because before you were saying that 95% was U.S. business, U.S. customers. Yeah. What percent is that today?
So 95% today is Canadian, and 5% is the U.S. So I still am in the U.S., and in fact, I continue to grow the U.S. My largest customer is actually a U.S. customer today, where we support over 5,000 individuals. But most of it is now in Canada. And so what it does is there's a security there also of knowing,
currency.
Currency is one, but it's local. So you kind of know, and it's expanding from there. So I'm actually going back into the U.S. I'm expanding into the rest of Canada. So I'm going to get back to where we were. Actually, we're already back to where I was, believe it or not, financially at least. So.
Now, what about, I'm going to, I have a whole bunch of questions. Pricing. Did your pricing change from version 1 to version 2? And I know version 1 is the pre-sale, and you're controlling, and you're having these great, U.S. clients. Yeah. Now you're more Canadian. Yeah. So it's Canadian dollars, not U.S. So there's less fluctuation.
It is.
How much does pricing come into play? How often do you look at it? Compare it to your competition?
Well, if you ask my accountant, I don't look at it often enough. But I do look at it. Obviously, the problem here is it's a very, very competitive market. So you have to do a great job. I think you have to do more than a great job. I think you have to go beyond what customers are expecting. But you got to keep the prices at a level where it's affordable. Remember, we go after small, medium businesses, and I say small, medium. It could be as high as 500 users, could be higher. So I consider that a medium business. But they're looking at their costs always. So you have to keep it at a level where it's fair. You're treating your customer with.
Now, just quickly before we kind of move on to the next segment. In like 30 seconds, CDMS. Yep. Not exactly the catchiest name from a marketing standpoint.
It's not.
What are your quick thoughts on that?
My thoughts is I can't change it now. It's too late.
It's family.
Years later.
It's family.
It's 22 years later. But remember what I said when I first started. The goal was I was a one-man show. And I did it. Actually, I did it for my family. And so there is a background behind the name. But what I wanted is the 4 letters that are there. It's Chris, Danielle, Michael, and Stephanie, which are my wife and my 2 children. So that was the idea behind it. I just wanted that. 22 years later, do I regret that it's that? Yeah, a little bit, but it's still, it's my family. And in fact, the people that are there with me today are my family. So That's right.
And the service, of course, speak volumes.
And the service speaks volumes. Absolutely.
So, and it's a great way just to end this segment because we're talking about family, and I know we're going to move on to the next topic with Michael Newton and talk about transition, and whether it's family transition or whether it's moving on. I know we spoke with Chris about selling to a third party, so when we come back, we'll explore a lot of that.
So that and Chris Symeon's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur is on the way.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, presented by FL Montreal, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar and FL Montreal's Josh Miller with you, and we have Chris Symeon of IT solutions firm CDMS. His one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur is on the way. But we welcome back Michael Newton, of course, of FL as well, to talk about transitioning family businesses. Welcome back, Mike.
Hey, Dan. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
And when he's not filling in and co-hosting, he's here as an expert in other areas. Yeah. And Mike, we were listening, and you were piping in as Chris was recounting his story about selling his business and then kind of buying it back after. There must have been a ton of thoughts going through your head, certainly on from the U.S. side of things, certainly where the dollar is. What would you like to share? What's popping out of your head right now?
We don't have enough time to run through everything, I think. I mean, I look at it and you see, so many times where larger businesses or public companies have come in to buy a Canadian business, U.S. businesses come in to buy Canadian. I have a very hard time hitting the marketplace and maintaining the service levels like Chris was talking about and kind of driving it into the ground. We're starting to see, again, a lot of flurry. We've had for a while a flurry of M&A activity, which is great, though it also makes me worry that we're coming to the end of a business cycle. We usually start to see a lot of this when companies are trying to create synergistic environments and are looking to bolster revenue, in certain environments. So it leaves me a little bit worried. I think the big concern on a family business transition is when you're coming to a cycle, like we'll come to the end of a cycle where we are right now, valuations are very high. And if you're comparing to the opportunity to sell to a U.S. buyer who in many cases multiples will range 7, 8, in some cases get as high as 12, which you won't see in Canada. You'll see 5 to 7s, 4 to 7s in Canada. And what it means is if you're going to transition your business to a family member, it's a huge, huge decision. One, obviously, is the next member in the family capable of doing this? 2, you're doing this in a market that's very high, so the value of being transitioned to the family member is at a very high value. And 3, probably more importantly, you could be leaving a huge amount of money on the table if you're going to sell to a third party. So, you have to sit back and look and say, is this about perpetuity and legacy, or is this about money? And, unfortunately, we've watched many multi-generational families fall apart. And it would have been cheaper for the kids to stay home and get a salary from the family as opposed to keep it going.
Well, then therein lies the question. Do families talk it out, or do the matriarchs that really understand the market and the business say, you know what, kids, there's a shot, but you know what, it might be in your best interest for us to just get a much higher price elsewhere and go find something else to do.
It definitely is an issue. I think you're going to have, from A to Z when it comes to looking at that type of environment within the family business. You're going to have the control freak who's, ultimately at the end of the day going to make the decision, and whoever's around.
You're looking in the mirror, right?
I was looking in the mirror, but this time I was looking to my right, who is Chris. So he was a self-professed control freak. But
was.
That's what I said, was a self-professed control freak. And I think what you have to do, and I think you owe it to the family, is to look at what the opportunities are. If you can go out and find a business that is going to give you an 8, 10, 12 multiple, and you're going to transition it down, how much upside is left? Is that family member going to take in order to actually ever reach that kind of dollars? And I think those are the things you have to put on the table. It's a lot of money.
What if the succession plan is ready, but the successor isn't? If you have like Buster Bluth, who's in his 6th year of college or something, and he'll get there, but he's not quite there yet. What kind of solutions do you have for that kind of scenario?
Well, if he's still hanging around Animal House and Blatarsky, I don't think you're going to have much of a transition program. But you know what? It's very difficult. I mean, the family members, life happens while we're making plans, right? And even if, little Johnny or little Sarah's coming out of university and is supposed to be taking over, the likelihood that they're going to jump out of school and create that environment is almost nil in most cases. So, your strategic plan of where you're going to go with a family member, it's a long, arduous decision. In many cases, it's easier to sell, pay the tax, take home your huge amount of money, and move on. You will hear some parents say, I don't know what my kids are going to do if they don't have the family business. This has been everybody's lifestyle.
And they can't necessarily work for somebody else.
They can't work for somebody else, and the corollary to that is some other people don't want them. And we've seen a lot of times where the next generation just can't, will work at another job because they're spoiled rotten. And it's very, very difficult. It's a hard game to play. And I would tell anybody who's going to that market, if you've got a huge opportunity to sell, I think you seriously have to look at what those dollars are. Legacy is great, but at the end of the day, how much does the family need to live?
Chris, do you, you're still a young guy, notwithstanding your version 1 into version 2 now.
24 years old, sir. 24.
Perfect. How far do you think into the future? Your kids are younger, but how far do you think into the future?
Actually, my kids today, my oldest is 29, my youngest is 26, so it's there, right? I mean, they're not little kids anymore. I do think about it. To be fair, it's not my decision. It's actually their decision more than mine. It's there. If tomorrow one of them comes to me and says, "Look, I'd like to do this," great. I encourage them to do what they like to do. The business that I built it because I love to do what I love the IT. I love to help people. I love to help companies. If it's not in their DNA, then they have to go do what they find is good for them, right?
But definitely as early as you can try and establish that, because there could be a pretty long ramp up period.
It is. So if tomorrow one of them said to me, "I want to do this tomorrow," it's not. It'll take a long time, 10, 15 years before they can take over and do it. And in fact, you're growing the business in the same time, right? So you kind of have to do both at the same time. You got to bring them up to speed and grow the business.
I think the healthy dose of realism is the hardest thing to find in these exercises. I think you deal with a lot of emotion, especially if you are the founder looking at the next generation going, this is the best thing for us. I want to keep this going. I want to look at the life it's given us. But you have to look at the realism that's in there. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people get caught in emotion and don't see the logical side of things. And I've watched many, many families spend an awful lot of good money after bad trying to make it work for the next generation, where, like I said, it would have been cheaper if they would have stayed home and paid them a $300,000 a year salary.
How do you communicate consistency and continuity to your clients when you're going through a transition?
On a family business side or any transition?
Family business.
So on a family business side, I mean, hopefully that, the one thing you bring to the table in a family business is the consistency of the family. Hopefully the next generation has been involved for a while with you as part of the ramp-up period, as Chris was saying. And so you should already have this natural progression in there. It certainly creates a much more stable environment than it does by bringing in a disinterested third party who's buying out the business. I think for most of your customers, most of your staff, it's just a continuation. They don't see it as a complete change. That third-party acquisition can be very scary for everybody involved. So I think you have two very different approaches. But certainly, like Chris was saying, this is the type of thing that takes years on a family business side. And if you don't get that next generation who wants to roll up their sleeves and be involved, you're going to scare away a lot of clients.
And this is really it. It's the ramp up time, it's communication, and certainly a lot more than that, but definitely those two things. Thanks very much, Mike, for sharing all that, and Chris, your stories as well. And as we come up to the last moment of the show, as we do each week, and this one the last for calendar 2018, Chris, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
I don't have just one.
Or 10 or 2 or 3.
Diversify. That's number one. You have to diversify. One of the mistakes that I made as an entrepreneur is I focused on, a few very large customers that took a lot of my time and did not think in the future, what's going to what happens if this customer is not there anymore. So diversify is number one. 2, listen to the folks around you. You're hiring good people. You're trusting them. They've shown that they know what they're doing, but you got to listen. And so that would be my biggest advice is listen to people around you. They know they're trying to help themselves, but you also and the company. Those are, I would say, the 2. And make sure at home that you have a good communication where where they know that you're working 24 hours a day, and there's somebody there to support you when you get home. So
no, that's great. So support is huge. And Dan, my quick takeaway is, yes, you can be the controlling shareholder, you can be a control freak, and Lord knows that I have my moments like some of you guys. But if you can be open-minded as well, there's some fantastic ideas, some great people around. Listen and engage them. Chris
Symeon of CDMS, thanks so much for stopping by this evening.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
And Michael Newton, thanks as well for your advice.
Happy holidays to everyone.
See you
Thank
in the
you
new
very
year.
much.
And
Happy
Josh,
holidays. There it is again.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas on all of them. Whatever you're celebrating, enjoy it. And Josh, we'll see you back here on the 21st. Now, on the 21st, it's our contest winner.
That's right. It is, and we'll reveal it at a little later date.
A little later? Okay.
Yeah.
It's someone who's familiar to CJD's audience, and she knows what she's talking about when it comes to human resources. Let's leave it at that. Today's Entrepreneur on CJD 800. Don't forget the community section at flmontreal.com, where you can listen to 10 years worth of programs. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year. Good night.